Tonight is a celebration. You have no complaints, sinners and saints, under the bright constellation.
Now It's suddenly so quiet in here. One of the things that happens at General Assembly is usually the meetings are in an enormous convention center, and the sound echoes and echoes and echoes. And you got a little bit of a sense of that from watching this portion of the banner parade, which initiates General Assembly every year. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock. I'm Reverend Ned Wight, the interim senior minister here at the congregation, serving with Reverend Jennifer Brower and the Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore. This morning, we are featuring recollections and experiences that people who are delegates to our Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, which happens in June of each year. And they're going to share with you some of their recollections and some of the impressions and the issues that General Assembly was wrestling with. So their names are in the order of service. Bob Nuxhall will be serving as a worship assistant for the first part of our service. And we are also honored to have, as a member of our congregation, a newly elected member of the UU Board of Trustees, Latifah Woodhouse. I don't see Latifah here right now, so I'll hold off in calling that out, may call that out again a little bit later. You will find, in addition to what you hear this morning, there's a flyer enclosed in your order of service about the Denominational Affairs Committee, which looks to create linkages between our congregation and the wider Unitarian Universalist world. And you will also find on the table on the way out a complete book of reports from the delegates that will give you a fuller view of what the delegate experience was this year. Following the service, we have our usual Unitarian Universalist Cafe, UU Cafe, in the social hall. If you are a first-time visitor with us, please be our guest at that lunch. You can get a voucher for that at the welcome desk across the lobby. At 1 p.m., there will be an orientation in the art gallery right through these doors for those who are considering membership in the congregation, 1 o'clock. And at 1:15, a workshop entitled, Can We Heroically Initiate a World War II Style Climate Mobilization? A workshop with Dr. Margaret Klein-Solomon, co-founder and director of Climate Mobilization. That'll be in the Beach Ballroom at 1:15. Just a reminder that the building will be closed tomorrow for a national holiday. Thursday is the first of our 3 Wight Ally discussions focusing on white fragility. Friday is Soulful Sundown and a Coffee House. And next Sunday, I'll be preaching on embracing our mission. So I invite you in the spirit of General Assembly, which was a little bit raucous and lively, to be raucous and lively in your greeting of one another this morning.
Do not be ashamed of your broken heart. It broke because you dared to use it, dared to stretch its shape to hold more love. Because you used it, its beats, to keep time to a song that only you could hear. And you, the owner of a well-used heart, are also loved. Come close. Let the love flow from our heart to yours, pouring in to mend the cracks, sliding in between the rusty gears until they tick again. Let your heart come back to life, broken and now broken open, which both may hurt and which can lead to room for much more love. Our chalice today will be lit by Karen Krieg Belfiore. The reading is from W.E.B. Du Bois. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient system. It is today that is when our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for a greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. Please rise in body or spirit to sing number 131 in the Gray Hymnal. Love will guide us, number 131. Please remain standing as we sing say our words of affirmation and the song of affirmation, printed in your order of service and also projected overhead. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need. This do we affirm and covenant with each other.
Let peace, goodwill,
Please be seated. This morning we will hear from 8 members of our congregation who served as delegates to this past June's General Assembly. They will share excerpts from their reflections, the complete text of which is available in the handout in the lobby. Karen Krieg-Belfiore and Karen Lingstad-Hughes and her daughter Fiona Lingstad-Hughes, our youth delegate, offer an overview of the assembly, the business the delegates conducted, and the feeling of being together with so many UUs at the same time. Karen, and Fiona. You'll notice that their names are spelled exactly the same, and one is a Karen and one is a Karen, just to let you know.
Good morning. Good morning. This year, the Unitarian Universalist Association held its General Assembly in Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City is the U.S. city which is the closest to its geographical center. It's located at the confluence of the Missouri and the Kansas rivers. This spot historically was a point of embarkation for various trails during our nation's westward expansion. The city had been in decline for decades, but has recently seen a revitalization. The central city, which was in the old embarkation point, is undergoing a reinvention, and this seemed to be an appropriate location for this year's GA. The UUA was faced in 2018 with the task of taking care of organizational business while reimagining itself with a new institutional structure, a structure newly sensitized to a larger culture of white supremacy. The UUA's General Assembly is its annual business meeting. Each year, Shelter Rock prepares and sponsors a delegation to actively participate in this annual work of the UUA. More than conducting business alone, GA is a celebration and a reaffirmation among Unitarian Universalists of their core values. This event contains many opportunities for celebration, worship, and ingathering occurring over a period of 5 days. It's located in a different city every year to enable UUs from around the nation an opportunity to participate. This year I perceived a quiet, focused, getting down to business vibe at this GA. The adopted theme was All Are Called, and this seemed to reinforce a sense of unified resolve to work on the issues that had been so challenging during the tumultuous 2017 GA. Chief among these issues was that of institutional white supremacy, in quotes, within the administration of the UUA. This year, under the leadership of Susan Frederick-Gray, the Right Relationship Team and the Commission on Institutional Change reports were given attention early on in the lineup of GA concerns. GA included numerous other annual reports and acknowledgments, and these included the Board of Trustees, the UUA budget, and the Commission on Social Witness reports. The voting on bylaws amendments was a featured part of the UUA business as well. This year changes voted on were to include more inclusive gender terminology within the bylaws themselves, the establishment of a youth position within the Board of Trustees, and voting rights as delegates were granted to religious educators. Through attendance at 5 days of UUA business meetings, I got to listen to the vital heartbeat of the organization, and I felt I was a participant in the process of supporting its life.
Good morning. What made this year particularly meaningful to me was that I was able to go as a delegate along with my daughter Fiona, who was now old enough to be selected as a youth delegate. Spending this mother-daughter week together at our first GA will be a memory I will hold dear for a lifetime. One of my favorite events was the banner parade. This is where each of the congregations enter the Great Hall with their representatives carrying their congregation's banner. Seeing this display brought up a whole mix of emotions. It felt a little like the parade of countries represented at the Olympics. I felt excited searching for when UUCSR would appear, excited to see people I knew representing their congregation. First sighting of Jane Clay. She's a Star Island friend. And just in awe of all the congregations and the thousands of UUs who had made the trip to Kansas City to be a part of GA. And now here's a brief excerpt from Fiona's report.
Sorry, I'm not as tall as my mom. It's gonna be fine. Oh yes, thank you. Much better. Okay, so my experience at General Assembly started off with familiar and unfamiliar faces. I was welcomed with arms by everyone who attended because we were all there for one reason, and that is our connected faith. Going to General Assembly made me feel a greater connection to Unitarian Universalism and the world as a whole. Since I attended as a delegate, I was able to contribute to voting. Voting turned out to be my favorite part. We would all gather in this huge hall and amendments would be brought up one by one. If you were a delegate, you had the opportunity to speak pro or con on the amendments. Everyone was respected, no matter your opinion. This is something that never happens outside. This is why Unitarian Universalism is so special.
Robin Finan Jones and Karen and Fiona and Catherine Ripley participated in the GA choir. This morning, our own Shelter Rock Choir will feature two anthems that were sung in Kansas City. The first, Wake Up, My Spirit.
In 2016, the UUA board made a commitment to Black Lives of UU, or BLUU, to raise over $5.3 million to advance racial justice and initiatives and leadership of persons of color within our movement. Over $3.1 million has been raised to date. This morning, you will have an opportunity to participate in this fundraising effort. Any money in today's offering not designated for your annual pledge will be forwarded to the UUA to support the Practice and Promise campaign of BLUU. A gift from an anonymous donor from this congregation will match every one of your gifts with a 2-to-1 basis. For every dollar you give this morning, the donor will give an additional 2. The ushers will please come forward now to receive this morning's offering. Please consider giving generously.
I trust we all appreciate what a gift we have in Nathaniel. Each year, General Assembly showcases ethical issues and justice concerns that Unitarian Universalists are grappling with around the country. Karen Lingstad-Hughes will read an excerpt of Andrea Starr's report telling us about the issue that powerfully captured her attention. Andrea is, at the present time, teaching 6th grade in the church school wing. So she was unable to be here, but Karen will read what she wrote.
Good morning again. excuse me, a major topic at the 57th General Assembly, and one that concerns me personally, communally, and globally, is the Me Too movement. The term Me Too evolved when in 2006, Tarana Burke, an activist, honored as the Time Person of the Year for 2017, founded the movement with the idea of empowerment through empathy, so injustice survivors would be assured that they were not alone. One workshop I attended was led by the young winner of the annual UU Women's Federation Sermon Award, Claire Fortune Ladd, Director of Religious Education at the Universalist Unitarian Church of Haverhill, Massachusetts. Her sermon, Me Too Now What?, was powerful and thought-provoking. Myself, a woman who has been affected by sexual injustice, was particularly moved by these words taken from her speech. Stop and think for a minute about the brilliance we lose every day because so many of us are using so much brain space, often subconsciously, just to survive. It's an incredible amount of time and energy we could reclaim if we weren't faced with this need to constantly safety plan. If women and gender non-binary folks didn't have to grip their keys in their hands to be used in self-defense, or check the back seat of their car for intruders before driving away. If people of color didn't have to teach their children exactly what to do and where to put their hands if a law enforcement officer approaches them. If undocumented folks didn't have to choose between bringing their abusers to justice and being departed from the only country they have ever known. If our incarcerated neighbors were not constantly afraid of being taken advantage of by guards and fellow prisoners alike. What the General Assembly Me Too workshops imparted to me was that this was a movement that has begun to take root. Injustices done to all genders have become more transparent and believed. What was tolerated in the past is starting to no longer be acceptable. More women and empathetic men need to apply substantive pressure politically and situationally, and positive efforts need to be publicized and applauded.
Perhaps these reports from GA have reminded you of concerns of your own community or your own circumstances that you would like to mark by lighting a candle. We invite anyone who would like to do so to come forward at this time. our very own Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore offered the prayer at the big public service at the Convention Center. So I invite you now to join with her in the spirit of meditation and prayer.
We've been called to hear our pain. I now invite you into a moment of silence, meditation, or prayer. Spirit of life and divine love, called by many names and no name at all. We call out to you and to one another to heal our broken hearts. We human beings are fragile creatures, our hearts so easily broken and scarred. Grief and pain and conflict separate us, one from the other. We are crying out. Can we hear one another? Can we feel the pain of Black mothers whose sons are targeted for being Black sons? Immigrant and refugee children separated from their parents, students fearful of gunfire in their own schools, those still suffering in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean and Houston. What about those who cannot even safely drink the water from their own taps? May we hold ourselves accountable, because it is not just these times, but all times. May we be held accountable to justice in all times. May we open our minds to each other's stories. May we perceive each other ever more clearly. May our hearts enlarge to hold each other's pain and joy. May our bodies entwine in embrace as we journey together. We call out, we reach out our hands to you, Spirit of life, and to each other. May it be so. Amen.
The next set of reflections from Shanti and Giuseppina report on an incident involving demonstrators from the Westboro Baptist Church in Topeka, Kansas, who came to sow dissension and disruption, but who meant something very different. Our own India Harris played a significant role on the safety team. Shanti and Giuseppina.
This GA was not without incident. During one of the general sessions, we were notified that a group of protesters from Westboro Baptist Church were going to show up in protest, and they did just that. A very small group of about 6 protesters stood on one side of the street, which was next to the convention center. They didn't speak, but their signs represented their hateful and homophobic messages. The signs read, "Fear God, mourn your sins. Fags doom nations. America is doomed. Divorce, remarriage, and same-sex marriage are all sin. Christians caused fag marriage. Believe on the Lord Jesus. The wages of sin are death. God won't change your chromosomes. And God hates proud sinners." They also have a website with hateful and negative information. Even their web address is a hateful one, www.godhatesfags. Meanwhile, on the other side of the street, the UUs held a large rainbow flag. One woman held a sign which read, "What happened to love thy neighbor?" with 2 hearts. One heart contained 2 intertwined women's symbols and the other 2 intertwined men's symbols. 2 people played guitars. There was a lively chant led by Reverend Rose Schwab. with a megaphone. She is a minister of Shawnee Mission University, UUC. India was on the safety team and was on our side of the street to be sure that we were safe and appropriate. Some other members of the safety team stood on the stairs behind the protesters. It all went without hitch because we UUs were on the side of love.
I was impressed by the professionalism of our India and team, heads of the safety team who gave us pointers on how to stay safe, to pay attention to the surroundings, to go out in small groups, and in case of problems, to call the safety team before calling the police. India gave a heartfelt presentation about having a compassionate heart, and she spoke about a black youth who was stopped and harassed by police and of activists of Westboro Baptist Church, who was jailed, and how after several efforts the activist was released from jail. She encouraged us to take on the cause of justice, as we have nothing else to lose but our chains.
Shanti and Giuseppina also participated in timely presentations on social justice issues of concern. The first was a Beacon Press lunch sponsored by our very own Unitarian Universalist Beach program, a longtime funder of this publishing arm of our association. And the second was a presentation lifting up challenges to democratic participation, now more important than ever. Shanti and Giuseppina again with brief excerpts about these events.
The Beacon Press held its annual gala, which was sponsored by our Beach program. There was one author present who told us a horrible story about immigrant women who worked in certain mushroom factories. He said the ideas of what we think about people going out to the field to harvest mushrooms could not be further from the truth in this case. He said that these women were holed up in a dark room and had to dig with their hands into troughs of manure. They were often the victims of sexual assault. I found this to be very disconcerting.
Of all the workshops that were presented at the conference, that were available, and one that I participated was most impressed was the one, Is Real Democracy Possible? It was presented by a young author of a book by the same name. He spoke of how it has become more and more difficult to run for office as it's too costly to fund a campaign. That is bad. If only the rich and powerful can have funding to be elected to office, the election should be public funded so we could all have honest representatives.
In the face of so many concerns and so much heaviness of the weight of the problems of the world, it was a good thing to have a little bit of relief from the music at the General Assembly. And Stephen is now going to share with us in the choir, Put a Little Love in Your Heart, with Love Train.
Join hands, start a love
saw you dancing in your seats. That was great. Thank you. One highlight of every GA is the Ware Lecture on Saturday night. This year's speaker was no exception. Brittany Packnett, teacher, policy expert, Teach for America's Vice President for National Community Alliances and co-founder of Campaign Zero, a policy platform to end police violence. Here now an excerpt from her 2018 Ware Lecture urging delegates, and all of us UUs, to put the power and privilege that we have to work to eliminate systemic racism in our country. Brittany Packnett.
Do you know what your fellow Black and brown UU members expect of you? Do you know if you've met their expectations? Do you know that standing with the oppressed is not to save them, but to save yourself? Do you know what your LGBTQ fellow UUers expect of you? Do you know what your disabled family members expect of you? Have you inquired as to what the women in your life expect from you? Do you know that you need to meet their expectations not because they need your help, but because you aren't free if they ain't? You know, at work, you ask your manager every day, every week, every quarter, exactly what they expect of you. And then you break your back to meet or exceed those very expectations in exchange for a paycheck. Why not ask your community every day, every week, every quarter exactly what they expect of you and use everything you've got to meet or exceed those very expectations in exchange for justice? This is our work, and I promise you it pays the very best dividends. Perhaps you've asked, perhaps you're striving every day to meet and exceed those expectations for the sake of something bigger than you. Perhaps you're as close to perfect as a human can be. But if you're anything like me, you must ask this question constantly of all you are in relationship with. My privileges and my platform demand that I ask my LGBTQ family, the disabled members of my community, the people of other colors that I love, the young people I hold dear, what do you expect of me? And how do I meet your expectations? I am not being figurative. I am being literal. And no matter how big or public or harmful my misstep or my mistake, if it means I failed to meet my expectations, then it is my job to humble myself and do better. I cannot expect people to give me grace where I have not taken responsibility. Now, I'm not here to blame or shame you. I'm not telling you anything that I don't tell myself. I'm not saying anything that I don't or won't or haven't said in any other room. I am not calling you out. I'm calling you in. I'm calling you in to the divine union of love and power. This single concept that I learned from Kingian principles is the key to how we meet and exceed the expectations that get us ever closer to freedom. I'm not inviting you into a catchy slogan or even a hashtag. I'm not inviting you into the kind of anemic love that is sentimental and useless. That kind of love lacks power. I'm not calling you into the kind of power that is uncaring and abusive. That kind of power lacks love. I am calling you into the divine union of love and power. It is a union that allows love to be powerful enough to take on systems and not just individuals. It gives love the audacity to seek justice swiftly and not merely incrementally. It is a union that allows power to be informed by love and disrupt all that stands in the way of freedom. I am calling you in to family and beloved community with one another. The beauty in this is that we don't have to wait to practice the divine union of love and power until we get out there, because we can be practitioners of love and power right here. It is popular popular to ask people what they would have done during the civil rights movement, what they would have done during the Holocaust, what change you'd make if you were president for a day. But you don't have to ask yourself what you would have done during times of uncertainty, distress, and injustice. You are living in them. You have always been. You don't need to ask yourself what you would do if you ever had the power. You have the power now, and you've always had it. Your power is not defined by a title. It is not defined by your willingness to live in alignment. It is defined by your willingness to live in alignment with a purpose bigger than yourself. We are called to make the world better, each and every one of us. We bear that responsibility in exchange for our inhabitants on this earth, whether we accept it or not. And your privilege increases your duty, whether you accept it or not. And whether it is with one child or your single family household or with entire congregations, your power is waiting on you to pick it up, inform it with love and expectancy, and work.
I encourage you to go online to www.uua.org and listen to her entire Ware Lecture. It is powerful and amazing. And finally, Robin and Patty will confirm for us that GA is full of surprises and powerful calls to action, such as Brittany has just delivered. Robin Finan-Jones and Patty Paris, come forward at this point.
As we approached the Kansas City airport, the pilot told us we would be landing in a few minutes. Shanti and I then see out the window that the plane is going up. And we say, hey, this plane is not landing. I think my heart may have stopped for a moment. Then thankfully, the pilot came back on the loudspeaker to tell us that an animal was on the runway. And we had to circle the airport until the animal was removed. I think we may have been up in the air for another 45 minutes. As we got off the plane, the pilot was there. I asked him what kind of animal was on the runway. Well, believe it or not, it was an armadillo. The pilot said that another plane had to circle the airport, as well as one plane on the ground could not take off. He said that a lot of gas was wasted. It was a funny story in the end, and I was glad that the animal was okay. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Susan Frederick-Gray, president of the UUA. She preached a sermon on Sunday, January 24th, called No Time for a Casual Faith. This sermon was a call for us to demonstrate our faith. These 3 paragraphs from her sermon really resonated with me. As a people of faith who say we are committed to justice, compassion, and equity in human relations, as a faith that says we are committed to the inherent worth and dignity of all people, as a faith that says we are committed to respect for the independent web of all life, we have a role to play. Our faith is calling more from us in this time. And 2 things are really clear to me right now. Number 1, this is no time for a casual faith or a casual commitment to your values, your community, your congregation, your soul, and your faith. No time for a casual faith. And number 2, this is not time to go it alone or think that we are in this alone. This is no time for casual faith. As Unitarian Universalists, we are first and foremost religious communities that practice love as our foundation. We are living in times of heartbreak, violence, and pain, and in this time we need communities that remind us of our humanity. These words made me think about how I practice my faith in these times. I think by becoming a member of the worship committee and a worship service assistant, I am being more involved in my faith. And now, Patty.
The highlight of the week for me was meeting and having dinner with our exceptional new UUA President, Susan Frederick-Gray. I first heard her speak when I attended the UUA General Assembly in Phoenix, Arizona 6 years ago, when she was the senior minister at the Phoenix UU. I was inspired by her strength in leading her congregation to practice civil disobedience against ICE and especially against Sheriff Joe Arpaio and his treatment of immigrants in that city. At GA that year, the UUA stood up as a body and marched to the jail where they were holding immigrants in terrible conditions. That's when I first saw the power of our shared faith. This year, the GA called us to live our faith and remember that Unitarian Universalism is first and foremost a religious community that practices love and kindness. Our practices are a way to nurture our humanity amid systems trying to tear us down and tear us apart. It is important to practice our faith more deeply at our core, especially at this time in history.
Our concluding hymn, number 1017, is about building a new way. And I think you see from the reports that we've heard of those who were present at our General Assembly this year, and the delegates from other congregations, that that's what we're about, trying to build a new way, a better way in our nation. Number 1017 in the teal hymnal, or the kind of bluish one. 1017, please, as your body and spirit allow, stand as we sing together. Please be seated. Our closing words are from UUA President Susan Frederick-Gray as delivered at the Sunday service, the benediction for that service.
Friends, we have made this hall a sacred space. And as we leave this circle today, let us remember to praise this gift of life. May we wonder and marvel at its beauty.
May we kindle more joy, more love, and more song into our hearts and into our days. And may we be led out in peace, and may we give back love.